Hello and welcome to our second episode of Whenever Wednesdays, the show where we talk about whatever we want, whenever we want. I'm Tim, and I'm here to talk to you guys about Project Almanac. Now, I promise that Whenever Wednesdays isn't a show only about time travel, but Tyler was talking about time travel last week, and he suggested that you guys watch Project Almanac, and although it is a good movie, the time travel makes zero sense. So I just wanted to make a dedicated video to go through Project Almanac and explain the movie to you guys if you haven't seen it yet, and also to explain how it doesn't make any sense at all. So, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to give you a quick rundown through the plot, but before we start, I have to ask you, why haven't you seen it yet? I mean, Tyler asked you to, he said, guys, I really think you should go watch this movie. He said that 2 weeks ago. You've had a full 14 days to go watch. What? Anyway, so the whole basic storyline for Project Almanac is there's this one kid, David. He is a budding senior in high school, and he's trying to get into college, and he gets accepted to MIT, but he doesn't get the scholarship. So he's trying to come up with some way where he can get money to go to school, but also get money so that his mom doesn't have to sell the house that they're in to go to school. His dad left him on his 7th birthday. I think he died in a car accident. I don't really remember, and I don't really know. It's not that important. Only thing you need to know is the dad is gone, but in a good way. Like, he's not like, my dad left me. It's more of a, shucks, my dad is dead. So, he and his buddies, they get together, and they're trying to find out ways, like, how can we save money? So, while they're in the attic, they find their dad's old video camera.
When did we get a video camera?
Oh, that's Dad's old camera, yeah. Remember that?
Yeah.
And in this video camera is footage from his 7th birthday, the last day his dad was there. And in the mirror...
Right there. In the mirror. Look in the mirror.
You see David. Not 7-year-old David from his 7th-year-old birthday. You see senior in high school David in a mirror in a window, and he's like, what? Time travel's possible. So he and his buddies, they find out that his dad was working on a time machine, and they build it. They build the time machine. And they're like, okay guys, what do we do? What do we do with our time machine now that we've got a working time machine? They're like, I know. I'm gonna fail out of chemistry, so let's go back in time and save my chemistry test. And they've already discussed in the movie, they went back in time and they saw, like, 2 of the characters met face to face, as in a future character met his self in the past, and they looked eyes and they're like, and they almost like exploded the world. So like, can't do that.
What? Oh my God, what's happening?
So they go back in time to fix this guy's chemistry grade, and he's kind of an idiot. So they walk up to his past self and say, hey brah, school's canceled today for like that class. And he's like, oh, okay, cool, and he just leaves. And so they go into class, and he answers the question that he got the first time they did the presentation, but the teacher doesn't ask the same question. So they basically Groundhog Day it, where he keeps going to class. He keeps going to class, but every single time it's slightly different, and he never, like, obviously he gets it, but it takes him at least 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 tries studying and then going through to get it right. After that, they win the lottery. Then they decide that they're going to go to a concert, like a festival, Lollapalooza. So they go back in time a couple months. They go to the concert. They spend all day there, and they have a grand old time. 2 of the characters, they're really hitting it off, and they have like a little bit of a moment. But our main character David doesn't get the signs, and he does not smooch the girl, and this hurts the girl, and she doesn't really.
I want to go skydiving.
She's all upset now, and he's like, why is she so upset? So he goes back and watches the footage, because it's a found footage movie, so he just watches the footage, and he sees how stupid he was, and he breaks their one rule of never jump alone, and he jumps alone. He goes back in time to Lollapalooza, he smooches the girl, he and her, they start dating, everything's wonderful, but now things are going wrong. A plane crashed, and 100-something people died in this plane crash. Like, guys, this didn't happen before. How did this somehow affect that to happen? So they're like, guys, we just need to go back before Lollapalooza. Because before Lollapalooza, everything was fine. And we'll stop ourselves from doing that. But then David's like, but then I'll never get to be like girlfriends with this girl. So he goes back alone to try and fix it. But before he jumps, one of his friends just, he's like, hey, what are you doing? I thought we never jumped alone. And so then he gets pretty close and he gets thrown back. When he comes back into the future, he's in the hospital. And he's like, aw, dang, man, this guy is like really hurt. I know. I'll just go back in time, save him, so I can still have the girl and still have my friends, and there won't be a plane crash and people won't be dead. He's like, yeah, this is a great idea. So he jumps back in time, but as he's jumping, his girlfriend walks up and she's like, what are you doing? Why are you jumping? So she runs up, they both go back in time together, and she's like, what? I thought you said never to jump alone. How many times have you done this before? And he's like, I went to Lollapalooza, and she's like, you went back in time just to read the situation, you're such a horrible person. And then her past self comes up, they see each other, and like, beep, 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 and they disappear, they're gone. Poof. They're gone. And he's like, ah, shucks. So it turns out that he went back in time to his 7th birthday. He goes downstairs, sees his dad, and he burns the time machine. He sets the camera down and he burns the time machine. And he's sitting there, and as the time machine is burning, he just disappears. Then cut back to the end of the movie. It's where he was in the beginning of the movie. They find their dad's old movie camera, and then they find their dad's old movie camera. They found 2 of them. The one that they originally found, and the second one. The one that has all of the footage from the movie that you just watched. And this is where you start to think like a little bit what's going on. You sit in the theater and you're like, that was a good movie. And then you get in the car and you're like, the fuck just happened? So, let me run down with where I think the movie goes wrong. I don't really have any suggestions for how they could have done it without breaking time, but this is why we have a problem with all the time travel that goes on. So the first big thing is that we don't understand is when they're going back in time to fix the chemistry test. Now, so when they first jump and go back in time, when they go back in time the first time, they walk up and they're like, yo bro, class is canceled today. Leave, shoo, get out of here. And he's like, oh yeah, good idea. And the reason why they did that was because they couldn't see themselves or the time would explode. And that makes sense, that's fine. If he would have got it on the first try, everything would have been fine and the movie would have been okay. But he doesn't. And they're like, gosh dang it guys, we have to come back in time and do it again. So they go back to the future, they study, and then they come back in time. But now is where we're running into problems, because if they're coming back in time to do it again, shouldn't their first, the first try be going on at the same time? And then you think, and then they mess up and they come back, but neither the second try or the first try is there, it's only the try that is happening at that moment. They should have to somehow come up with a way and say, hey guys, we messed up. Please just go back in the future and we'll try. It doesn't make sense. And I thought of a pretty good explanation. And if you watched Tyler's video last week, you would know that this is called a multiverse. You would know that this is called a multiverse timeline, where each time you go back in time, it creates a new, different dimension universe. And we didn't know this at the time, and I came up with it myself. Obviously I wasn't like, ooh, I'm so smart, but the theory I came up with, and I called it the Hamburger Theory, and here's why. Because when they come forward, they'll jump down, and they'll be in a new timeline. And because they jumped down, their selves that were there in the other timeline, they're not there. So they can go forward and they're like, oh dang it, we have to do it again. So they jump into a different universe, so their original try isn't there. So each person is split up in between each different timeline. And the reason why we called it the hamburger method is because, well, I think it looks like a little bit like a hamburger, if I say so myself. And we're like, yeah, that makes sense, this movie is good again. But then we start thinking, when David went back in time to change Lollapalooza, if the different universe, if the multiverse, the Hamburger Theory is true, the rest of his group shouldn't be there. It should only be him back in time. Because the problem that we're having with it is if he goes back in time to Lollapalooza, he would somehow have to get himself separated from his girlfriend to do it. Because he can't just walk up to himself and say, hey bro, hold on, you're gonna mess up, I got this. Because then they'll see each other and the time would explode. But he didn't jump back with one of his friends that could cover for him. It doesn't make sense. And so so we're like, okay, but if he goes back in time to a different universe, none of his friends should be there because it's a universe where they weren't originally there. So it should only be him. And it doesn't make sense to me. And then the last thing in the movie that doesn't quite make sense is at the very end. He grabs his time machine. He throws it into the trash can. It burns. He disappears. And that doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense in the sense that the time machine is gone, so how could he have traveled back in time in the first place? So, he's gone. But the camera didn't disappear. The camera still stayed there. And the camera appeared in their house a second time. Right? But how did he ever show up in the original footage, in the mirror? How did he show up in the mirror? Because if he was recording everything with all of his different cameras, when they went to the attic the first time, shouldn't there have been already a second camera? Because if he was recorded, then he is also recording. So that's two. So shouldn't there already been two cameras? But let's just ignore that. Let's just say that the second camera was never a thing. Just for the first one. They found their first camera and then they get their second one, that's fine. But when he destroys the time machine, shouldn't the camera also disappear? Why does that show up in the attic? And then they're like, they watch all the footage of the movie that they just did, and he goes up to his girlfriend who they really haven't met yet, and he's like, hey, I think we're going to change the world. And it's like, how are you going to change the world? Isn't the time machine destroyed? Or is there a different time machine in this place? Is there a different time machine? But that doesn't make sense. So that is my take on Project Almanac. And I still think it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, I still recommend you watch it. It's just the time travel doesn't quite make sense, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's an interesting thing to talk about. Now, if you have any theories on how all the time travel makes sense, please comment that down below, because I would really like to read about what your theory is on, and see if the movie does actually make sense. If it just isn't poor writing, but actually it does make sense and I'm just too stupid to see it. So that's this episode of Whenever Wednesdays. I do hope you enjoyed dearly. If you do, if you could subscribe and I'd really appreciate it. And just a little update to what's going on. Tyler and I and Doug, we've been working on a superhero comedy short, and it is 10 out of 10. It's really good. We wrote the script 2 years ago, and we're finally producing it. But we're working with another channel on it, and so he's doing all of the editing right now. So we got it all filmed, but it's not going to get edited for another couple of weeks. For Whenever Wednesdays, we'll get back again with you guys in 2 weeks, and that will be the last episode of October for Whenever Wednesdays. So we're going to have to do something Halloween related. So next Whenever Wednesdays, we'll tell you about 5 horror movies that we really think that you should watch, and I think it'll be a pretty good episode. It'll be pretty good. You should come back and subscribe for that. Also, one thing that we're going to try and work on is we're going to try and get back to the content that a lot of you subscribe for. We're going to try and get back to short films. So yes, we've got one short film that's off editing, but we want to do something that we can hopefully finish up before that and get that out to you. So we're working on a horror-esque, spooky, Halloween-y script that we think you guys would like. We're working on that right now. We're going to try and get in production sometime this week. But as always, I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Now, if you have any theories on how all the time travel makes sense, please comment that down below, because I'd like to read what you think about it. Also,